If you've been following this channel for an extensive amount of time, you might know about a series I did called the Smash Archive, in which I looked through the origins of almost every franchise featured in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. And whilst having the odd series I wasn't familiar with, it was something I felt fairly comfortable covering due to my long history with Nintendo, having been a personal fan of their output since I got a Wii back when I was still in primary school. So I figured, why not try to do a similar series, but for a company whose output I should really know more about. That company in question being PlayStation. To give some quick background, I've had a history with each major console to come from Sony, but nothing to the extent of my history with Nintendo. For the quick version, my nan had a PS1, but I don't have many memories with it, likely due to being too young at the time. The PS2 was actually my first game console, though I mostly just stuck with licensed games, primarily Lego and SpongeBob. My dad got a PS3 for his birthday, but outside of Little Big Planet and PlayStation All-Stars, we mostly ended up using it to watch Blu-rays. I got a PS4 for Christmas, though it ended up mostly being used for just playing Lego games until my later teens, where it then became a glorified Yakuza machine, which then led me to splitting the cost with my dad to get a PS5 solely to play Lost Judgment at 60 FPS, and since then I've mostly used it for later Yakuza titles and fighting games. In addition, my dad had a PSP, which was mostly just for watching movies on plane flights, my only memories with it being a few minutes of playing a SpongeBob game for it, and I never got a PS Vita as I already had a 3DS, and the first time I ever heard about it was when people online were discussing how hard it was flopping, which wasn't exactly the best endorsement. If only there was a game that was exclusive to the PS5, was immediately understandable to a newcomer, but also worked as a celebration of PlayStation's 30 years of history. Anyway, so then Astro Bot released, and it was the second best game I played in 2024, behind only Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth. For the few people who missed this game, or just don't have a PS5, Astro Bot is a 3D platformer made by Team Asabi, an offshoot of PlayStation's now defunct Japan studio, who got their start with the free packing game on the PlayStation 4, which was an augmented reality game played with the PS4 camera called The Playroom, with this game then getting a sequel, which served as another free launch title, this time being for the PlayStation VR accessory in 2016, fittingly called The Playroom VR. They would then take the robot characters from these games and make a series of platformers starring them, with 2018's Astro Bot Rescue Mission, which was another PS4 VR title, Astro's Playroom, which was the PS5's free packing game, and our topic of interest, 2024's Astro Bot. Now, in addition to Astro Bot itself just being a really good game, one of the main topics of discussion from when it released was the decision to have some of the robots you save across the game's various levels be dressed up as various icons from across PlayStation's extensive history, referred to in-game as VIP bots. Them either being from games developed or published in-house by PlayStation's various studios, or from third-party franchises that have an extensive history with the platform. This made me want to learn more about the various franchises present, who they decided to include, and what exactly their relation to PlayStation is. So come along with me as I start this extensive journey to go through the origins of every VIP bot in Astro Bot. So how this will work is that we'll go through each level, explain the general theme of the VIP bots you save and the history of the franchise or franchises present, and then go more in depth with the specific characters represented. However, before we start going through the game's first world, the Gorilla Nebula, let's quickly jump back to Astro's Playroom, since as part of the build-up for Astro Bot's release, the game was actually updated so that each of its 4 worlds had a VIP bot to save, which can then be transferred over to Astro Bot, each one being found within the crash site, which serves as the central hub. When it comes to where these bots come from, 2 of them originate from series which we'll be discussing later, so I'll save the series background when that time comes. First we have Greedy Ape, which is based on one of the many generic apes you capture from the Ape Escape series, who in Astro Bot sits upon some crates eating a pile of bananas. The other is Nightmare Guardian, who's modeled after Lady Maria, a boss prominently featured in the promotional material for Bloodborne's DLC expansion, The Old Hunters, whom after being left guilt-ridden following an excursion to the fishing hamlet, where she and her fellow hunters slaughtered the town's villagers who had mutated from the corpse of a great one called Kos that washed ashore nearby, along with enacting some kind of violation against Kos's body, abandoned her weapon in a well and took her own life, her spirit then getting trapped in the Hunter's Nightmare, a twisted version of the Cathedral Ward which houses the spirits of those responsible for the fishing hamlet massacre, along with any future hunter that became blood drunk. Within the overworld, she can be seen sat on the throne the player finds her on in Bloodborne, though instead of appearing to be dead with blood spilling from her neck and wrist, she's instead just dozing off. The other two VIP bots come from franchises that otherwise go unrepresented, the first being Gran Turismo, a series of racing simulation games made by Polyphony Digital, which itself was an offshoot from a development group within the Japan studio called Poly's Entertainment, the series creation often being credited to Kazunori Yamauchi, who in contrast to the over-the-top arcade-style races that were popular at the time, wanted to make a racing title as true to real-life racing as possible, an idea so ambitious at the time that Sony only agreed to greenlight it after his team proved themselves capable with the MotorToon Grand Prix series, the first entry releasing in 1997 for the original PlayStation. Whilst definitely a huge gamble, it was one that massively paid off, as Gran Turismo went on to become the best-selling game for the console with 10.85 million copies sold, leading it to get multiple sequels and spin-offs, the most recent being 2022's Gran Turismo 7, which was a cross-gen title for both PS4 and 5, with the series currently standing as PlayStation's best-selling franchise with over 100 million copies sold. As for the bot pull from the game, named Pro Driver, it's one of the handful of bots that isn't based on any specific character, instead just being a general stand-in for the type of character you play as throughout the series, in this case a race car driver with the Gran Turismo logo on its helmet, with it holding onto a steering wheel controller, which is a common type of peripheral used by racing sim fans for a more authentic experience, the blue grips on the wheel's side making it most resemble the Thrustmaster T150. The last one from this group comes from Returnal, a third-person shooter roguelike that was published by Sony and developed by House Marquee, a Finland-based studio founded in 1995 as a result of a merger between companies Bloodhouse and Terra Marquee, the title being the developer's first AAA game, which released in 2021 as a PS5 exclusive. It's seeing you try to survive after getting stranded on a dangerous alien planet called Atropos, with its success eventually leading to the studio being purchased by Sony and made a part of PlayStation Studios just a few months after release, along with it also later seeing a PC port in 2023. The bot, named Stranded Scout, is based on the game's main protagonist, Celine Vassos, a pilot and explorer for the Astra Corporation that traveled to the off-limits planet in pursuit of a white shadow signal, in the process crashing the ship she was on called Helios, and after exploring the planet, starts discovering her own corpses, later learning that she's now trapped in a time loop where every time she dies, she's taken back to the moment she crash-landed on Atropos, the game following her journey to hopefully escape both the planet and the time loop. In Astro Bot, when the Stranded Scout is attacked, they'll fall over with a cracked helmet as if they died, before waking back up like nothing happened, referencing the time loop Celine gets trapped in, with them also holding on to a small action figure of an astronaut, these appearing in the game as artifacts which can be used one time each to revive yourself to full health if you die. With that out of the way, let's move on to the first level of the Gorilla Nebula, Sky Garden, which features two VIP bots pulled from one of PlayStation's biggest franchises, Ratchet and Clank, a series of action games made by Insomniac Games, which debuted in 2002 for the PlayStation 2, which came about after Insomniac decided to make something new after finishing development on Spyro 3, the first game following the two titular protagonists, the mechanic Ratchet and robot Clank, working together to travel and save the universe from Drek Industries and their chairman, Alonzo Drek, who plans to destroy various planets to build a new one for his race, the Blarg. Ratchet and Clank would end up selling 3.71 million copies, making it the 23rd best-selling PS2 game, along with getting critical acclaim for its graphics and the game's main selling point, the wide variety of over-the-top weapons, ranging from a vacuum gun to one that shoots homing beams of electricity to a multi-barreled rocket launcher, leading it to become one of PlayStation's most heavily supported franchises, consisting of 9 mainline entries, multiple side games, and even an animated movie which released alongside a remake of the first game, the most recent entry being 2021's Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart, which initially released as a PS5 exclusive with a PC port coming out in 2023. It's similarly gained positive reviews and has currently sold at least 3.97 million copies. For the characters pulled from the series, first is Tooled Up Mechanic, who's based on Ratchet, one of the last remaining Lombaxes in the universe, who in the first game was an aspiring mechanic with dreams of exploring the universe, though was unable to leave his home on Veldin until encountering Clank, a small robot who escaped a Blarg robot factory after discovering Drek's plans to extract parts of the planet Nivalis, crash landing on Veldin where he then agrees to work with Ratchet, providing the use of his robotic ignition systems for his ship to function, with the pair being an inseparable duo ever since. Whilst in the crash site, in addition to hanging around a smaller boss modelled after Clank, he'll also be swinging around the Omni Wrench, the signature weapon of the Lombaxes, which Ratchet uses as both a tool and as a melee weapon, it easily standing as the most iconic and recurring weapon in the series. Finally, by attacking the bot, they'll drop a large pile of bolts, which serve as the main currency across the series, primarily to upgrade or buy new weapons. The other bot is Multiversal Rebel, who's modelled after Rivet, a brand new playable character introduced in the most recent Ratchet game, Rift Apart, her being a Lombax from an alternate universe in which her counterpart to Dr. Nefarious, a series recurring villain introduced in the third game, Up Your Arsenal, rules over the universe and has never lost in battle. She's introduced when, after Nefarious causes multiple dimensional rifts to open after shooting a device called the Dimensionator, she's the one who ends up finding Clank when he and Ratchet get split up, eventually working with the two to both repair the Dimensionator and hopefully defeat Emperor Nefarious. This bot is the first to gain an accessory via the Gacha Lab, a giant capsule machine which unlocks once you've collected at least 16 puzzle pieces, the prize in question being the Crate Whacker, which is Rivet's hammer that, for all sakes and purposes, is just her equivalent to Ratchet's Omni Wrench. In addition, attacking them causes to get pulled into and then drop out of a rift. Next up, we have Aztec Trail, which pulls from 2 franchises to come from the early days of one of PlayStation's most renowned studios, Naughty Dog, who initially started as an independent studio making games for PC, before rising to prominence with releases like Rings of Power for the Mega Drive and Way of the Warrior for the 3DO, the latter of which was published by Universal Studios Interactive via a bidding war, which ended with Naughty Dog getting a professional studio and the funding to make 3 games they would have full creative control over. The team ultimately landed on the idea of making a 3D platformer which would release exclusively for the original PlayStation, due to the system's lack of character mascots at the time and most of its competitors either suffering from poor sales or clunky development units. The end result being 1996's Crash Bandicoot, which follows a Bandicoot that gets mutated by the mad scientist Dr. Neo Cortex in the hopes of making him a general for his genetically altered animal army. However, whilst Crash is able to break free from being mind-controlled, he also ends up getting chased out of Cortex's castle, with him now having to trek his way through various islands to save a female Bandicoot he met whilst captive called Torna. Crash Bandicoot would not only get rave reviews, the title often being held alongside Nintendo's Super Mario 64 for effectively pioneering and defining the design of the 3D platformer genre, it would go on to sell 6.82 4.2 million copies, making it the system's 11th best-selling game. And despite never officially being named as such due to Sony not owning the character, Crash himself was and still is widely considered to be the PS1's mascot. Due to this success and their agreement with Universal, Naughty Dog would make 2 sequels, Crash Bandicoot 2 Cortex Strikes Back and Crash Bandicoot Warped, which would do even better, though after making the spin-off kart racer, Crash Team Racing, they would decide to leave the series behind, with Sony soon after buying them as an official PlayStation studio in 2001. Universal would attempt to continue the series without them, but despite going through multiple developers and making the series multi-platform, starting with 2001's The Wrath of Cortex, it never quite saw the same success it did during the PS1 days, with the rights to the series eventually being transferred to Activision in 2007 through a series of mergers. Crash would eventually go on an extended hiatus through most of the 2010s, before suddenly returning in 2017 with the Insane Trilogy, a collection of remakes of the first 3 Crash games made by Vicarious Visions, which initially released as a PS4 exclusive, before later getting ported to the Xbox One, Nintendo Switch, and PC in 2018. The critical and commercial success of which would later lead to both a remake of Crash Team Racing by Beanox in 2019, and a brand new platformer with 2020's Crash Bandicoot 4 It's About Time, which was made by Toys for Bob and served as a soft reboot for the series, retconning every game after the release of Crash 3 from the timeline. Given how important the series is to the history of both Naughty Dog and PlayStation, it shouldn't be too shocking to hear that Astro Bot features a VIP bot based on the series' titular main protagonist, which in the game is named Spinning Marsupial, in reference to Crash's main method of attack by spinning in place. In addition, the bot has an accessory called Protective Spirit, which is based on Aku Aku, a floating mask and witch doctor who helps guide Crash through his various adventures, along with serving as a power-up to provide extra hits and invincibility. Finally, in the Crash site, it can be seen performing the Crash Dance, a dance introduced in the second game, which Crash would do upon returning to the Warp Room, either after beating a boss or collecting a gem. The other bot is pulled from the franchise Naughty Dog would make after their departure from both Universal and Crash with the Jak and Daxter series, the first game releasing in 2001 exclusively for the PlayStation 2, with the game's design taking the high energy of the Crash series, but with a more open, non-linear design inspired by titles like Mario 64 and Banjo-Kazooie, along with a higher emphasis on storytelling. It following a young boy named Jak whose journey to try and reverse his best friend Daxter's transformation into a weasel-like creature called an Ottsel eventually turns into a quest to stop their world from being corrupted by Dark Eco. Despite getting positive reviews and selling 4.2 million copies, making it the 18th best-selling PS2 game, due to it not performing quite as well as their previous efforts with Crash, which at their peak sold around 7.5 million units, the sequels would go for a darker and more mature tone inspired by the success of titles like GTA 3, along with adding guns and a Tony Hawk-inspired hoverboard. Whilst both Jak 2 and 3 were still generally liked by critics, from this point forward, the series would sort of mirror what happened to Crash, where after 3 main installments and a racing game spin-off with Jak X, Naughty Dog would leave the series and move on to other projects. However, unlike Crash, which would still see plenty of games after the departure, Jak and Daxter only got a PSP side game made by Ready at Dawn, which is set during the 2-year time skip from the opening of Jak 2 and puts Daxter in the lead role, as well as Jak and Daxter The Lost Frontier by High Impact Games, which released for both the PS2 and PSP, and got an overall mixed reception. Since then, the series has effectively been dormant outside of HD remasters of the first 3 games. It definitely having a decent fan base and still stands as an icon of the PS2 era, but is also easily the least popular of Naughty Dog's PlayStation output. The bot inspired by this series is Eco Warrior, who's modeled after one of the game's titular heroes, Jak, specifically using his design from the first game, with Daxter appearing as an accessory called Wisecracking Sidekick, who'll stand on the main bot's shoulder whilst posing. In addition, if the bot is attacked, they'll actually recreate the death animations from the first game, where Jak falls to the ground whilst Daxter either makes a quip or screams in his face. Let's shift gears slightly and discuss the Lost Galaxy, an additional 6th world consisting of secret levels uncovered by finding secret exits across various other stages, but the first of these levels we'll be discussing being Fan Club, which has its entry hidden within Aztec Trail. This is another one where all the bots originate from the same franchise, in this case being the Oddworld series, a line of games made by the American developer Oddworld Inhabitants, which was founded in 1994 by duo Lorne Lanning and Sherry McKenna, both of whom had backgrounds in special effects and computer animation. The first game, titled Oddworld Apes Odyssey, being a cinematic platformer, a subgenre of 2D platformers that differentiate themselves with realistic animations and physics, and an emphasis on trial and error puzzles, which released in 1997 as a PlayStation exclusive, with it also later receiving ports for PC and Nintendo's Game Boy. The title following the titular Abe, a Madokan slave forced to work at the Rupture Farm's meat processing plant, attempt to escape while saving as many Madokans as he can after discovering that the plant owner, Moloch the Glutton, plans to start harvesting them into food after the company's profits take a downturn following a population decline of the animals they currently harvest. Abe's Odyssey proved to be a major hit, gaining critical acclaim for its tight controls, impressive graphics and animated cutscenes, the intelligence of the enemy and Madokan AI, and its incredible art style and world building, the only derision coming from its high difficulty, with it reportedly selling 1 million copies by the start of 1998 and 2 million by 2001. Whilst Oddworld is mostly known as a PlayStation franchise, after Odyssey and its 1998 sequel, Abe's Exodus, it actually briefly transitioned to being an Xbox series, with 2001's Munch's Odyssey and 2005's Stranger's Wrath both initially releasing as exclusives for Microsoft's first console. However, not only would both games later be ported to the PS3 and Vita, a 2014 remake of Odyssey would initially launch as a PS4 exclusive, along with 2021's Oddworld Soulstorm, which serves as a reimagining of Exodus, initially releasing as a console exclusive for PS4 and 5, with both titles later getting ports on PC, Xbox, and Nintendo Switch. For the bots featured, we have the Madokan Liberator, Madokan Minion, and Madokan Follower, all of which are modeled and named after the race of creatures Abe comes from and saves over the course of the games in which he serves as the lead, with the Liberator most likely being the stand-in for Abe himself, who using voice chants can instruct the other Madokans to follow him or wait, with the original game's good ending requiring you save at least 50 of them. In the crash site, the three of them will slowly walk back and forth, with attacking them causing them to roll around on the floor before farting, causing them and the other Madokans near them to laugh. The roll being an evasive maneuver Abe can do, mostly to get into smaller areas, with the fart and laugh being two other communication commands he can do. The laugh not really doing anything, though the fart can be used to end whistle passwords or to just make other Madokans laugh. Next up, we have Creamy Canyon, which features characters pulled from Konami's Metal Gear franchise, a series of stealth action games created by game developer legend Hideo Kojima, which got its start in 1987 for the MSX2 computer, though for our purposes we're specifically interested in the series' third entry, Metal Gear Solid, which initially released in 1998 as a PS1 exclusive, the title seeing the main protagonist of the first two games, Solid Snake, being brought out of retirement after a renegade special forces unit take over a nuclear weapons facility on an Alaskan island called Shadow Moses, them threatening to use the nuclear capabilities of the newly built Metal Gear Rex if the government doesn't surrender the body of Big Boss and a ransom of $1 billion. Metal Gear Solid is not only considered to be a landmark title for the PS1, on top of being credited for being the entry that made Metal Gear Konami's biggest franchise, it's also widely considered to be one of the most important video games of all time, mostly thanks to its massive innovations for both how a game could tell a story through full voice acting and both in-game and pre-rendered cinematics, along with the big advancements it made for the stealth genre as a whole, in the end receiving unanimous praise from both critics and general audiences, along with selling 7 million copies, making it the 10th best-selling best-selling PS1 game, and whilst the series would later expand to start releasing on PC and Xbox, along with the odd title that released on Nintendo, Metal Gear is still widely viewed as an icon of PlayStation. Given that status, it's not surprising that Astro Bot would include various characters from the series, some of which we'll actually be discussing in another video. For now though, our first one to focus on is Legendary Mercenary, who's based on Solid Snake, the main protagonist of Metal Gear 1 and 2, as well as Metal Gear Solid 1 and 4, with him also being a supporting character in Solid 2. The man being, as his bot's name would suggest, a legendary mercenary who became known for completing various missions that would primarily revolve around stopping various terrorist forces from utilizing giant mechs called Metal Gears. The first game introducing him as a rookie recruit of the Elite Special Forces unit Foxhound, with MGS1 revealing he's also the cloned son of Big Boss, the original leader of Foxhound and final boss of Metal Gear 1. The bot's appearance is specifically based on his look in MGS1, with it being possible to get him the accessory Cunning Disguise, which is a cardboard box he'll hide underneath. Boxes appearing and being used by various protagonists across the Metal Gear series to hide from enemies and security cameras. Next up, we have Psychic Menace, who's based off of one of the most iconic bosses to come from Metal Gear, Psycho Mantis, a member of the Foxhound unit that serves as the main antagonistic force of MGS1, who possesses incredibly strong psychic powers which allow him to break the fourth wall and communicate with the player, getting a read on their personality by checking the game's metadata, going through their memory card to see what games they like to play, even making specific mention of other Konami titles like Symphony of the Night and Suikoden, moving the controller using the DualShock's rumble, and can even read the player's inputs, making it impossible to fight him, with the only way to get past his mind reading being to plug the controller into the second controller port. In the hub, it will float above his accessory, Nostalgia Box, which is a CRT TV connected to a PlayStation which displays a recreation of the scene just before the Psycho Mantis boss fight, the bot even recreating his effect to make the controller rumble both in the actual game and real life if you stand close enough to him, with the TV turning off by attacking it, causing the bot to panic before it switches it back on, potentially referencing one of Psycho Mantis's powers where he makes it look like the console has been disconnected from the TV. Finally, we have Mystery Ninja, who's based on Grey Fox, who was actually introduced in the original Metal Gear as an elite member of Foxhound, who was captured after he breached into Outer Heaven and discovered the original Metal Gear unit, with him then defecting to join Big Boss in Metal Gear 2, piloting the newly built Metal Gear D before dying after a fistfight with Snake in a minefield. In Metal Gear Solid, his body was recovered and rebuilt via cybernetic surgery, giving him a metal exoskeleton which can make him appear invisible and a high-frequency blade that can cut through near enough anything, with him traveling to Shadow Moses to battle with Snake again, albeit with a massively deteriorating mental state. In the crash site, he'll be taking on various poses with his blade, referred to in Astro Bot as Vibrating Chocoto, with most of the poses either being based on artwork or poses he makes in the actual games, with attacking him causing his optic camouflage to turn off and his helmet to open up. Returning to the Lost Galaxy via Creamy Canyon's secret exit, we have the level Fungi, which switches things up a little bit by featuring characters from two series which, for the most part, don't have anything to do with each other, the common thread being their connection to vampires, the European folklore monster that became an icon of horror thanks to the works of John Polidori and Bram Stoker. The first of these two franchises is Konami's Castlevania, which got its start in 1986 on both the NES and MSX2, the games typically being 2D platformers which revolve around a member of the Belmont clan having to track their way through the titular Castlevania in order to kill Dracula, the exact time period ranging from 1094 in Lament of Innocence all the way to 2036 in Dawn of Sorrow. For our purposes, we're specifically interested in 1997's Castlevania Symphony of the Night, which initially released as a PS1 exclusive, though there was also a Japan-exclusive Sega Saturn port released a year later. This entry following Dracula's half-human son, Alucard, awakening from a long slumber in 1797 upon discovering that the vampiric Lord of Darkness has returned once again, but no one from the Belmont clan has stepped up to challenge him, leading the Dhampir to raid the castle himself to stop his father. Whilst the game underperformed at launch, thanks to positive word of mouth, it managed to become a sleeper hit for the system, with it nowadays being considered not just one of the best entries in the series, but one of the best video games of all time, with its non-linear design, which was partially inspired by the previously released Castlevania 2 Simon's Quest, often being credited alongside Nintendo's Super Metroid for helping popularize what we now refer to as the Metroidvania subgenre of platformers, with this design being used for the vast majority of Castlevania games which released afterwards. Two bots are pulled from this game, the first, Vampire Killer, being based on Richter Belmont, who previously appeared as the main protagonist of 1993's Castlevania of Rondo of Blood, which was an exclusive for the NEC PC engine, known internationally as the TurboGrafx 16, more specifically its Super CD-ROM add-on, with Rondo later getting a remixed Super Nintendo port in 1995, subtitled Dracula X, as well as a PSP remake in 2007 called the Dracula X Chronicles. The bot's design is based on his look from Symphony of the Night, in which he's playable for the game's opening level, which acts as a loose retelling of Rondo's ending, as well as in a secret mode which lets you play the rest of the game as him instead of Alucard, with the name Vampire Killer being a direct reference to the whip which serves as the Belmont's main weapon against Dracula's forces. After getting the Vampire Slayer's Sanctuary accessory, he can be found sat on a stone chair with an evil glare, mimicking his later appearance in Symphony, where it's revealed that he's been captured and brainwashed by one of Dracula's minions, the Dark Priest Shaft, Alucard finding him sat on Dracula's throne, and by attacking the bot, he'll briefly break free of the mind control and kill two skeletons with his whip. The other bot is Dandy Dhampir, who's based on Symphony's main protagonist, Alucard, who, like Richter, actually originates from a previous entry, in this case first appearing in the final game of the NES trilogy, 1989's Castlevania 3 Dracula's Curse, being one of the recruitable allies that can help Trevor Belmont on his quest to slay the Vampire Lord. His will to go against his father being thanks to the words instilled to him by his human mother Lisa, who even whilst being killed due to getting accused as a witch, instructed her son to never take his anger out on humans, with the additional depth and redesign he was given for Symphony, leading Alucard to become one of the most popular protagonists in the series. In the crash site, he can be found sleeping in a coffin, referencing his centuries-long slumber between the events of Dracula's Curse and Symphony, with attacking it causing the lid to fly off, with the bot waking up before either looking in a mirror to brush his hair, turn off an alarm clock, or silence a loud chicken, with it then closing the coffin and falling back asleep. The last bot is taken from another vampire-inspired title, which I actually briefly mentioned at the start of this video, that being Bloodborne, an action RPG developed by a mix of PlayStation's Japan studio and From Software, utilizing the same style of gameplay popularized by the latter's Dark Souls series, which released in 2015 exclusively for the PlayStation 4. In addition to Bram Stoker, the title also takes inspiration from the works of H.P. Lovecraft, with the world's architecture being based off of 19th century buildings in Romania and the Czech Republic. The game seeing you play as a hunter traveling through the decrepit city of Yharnam, which is being contaminated with a plague that's turned the civilians into monsters, the player having the ultimate end goal of finding something called pale blood, along the way learning the origins of both the plague as well as the backstory of Yharnam and its inhabitants. Much like near enough everything made by FromSoft, Bloodborne was met with near universal acclaim, with it having been reported to have sold 9.3 million copies, making it the system's 15th best-selling game, with the title frequently being heralded as one of the best games made utilizing the Souls style of gameplay, with a modern re-release on PS5 and PC being a near constant request from fans to both Sony and FromSoft. And whilst there's been no news on that front, the studio does seem to be making a new multiplayer title with a very similar aesthetic to Bloodborne, with with the currently upcoming The Duskbloods, which as of right now is set to release in 2026 as an exclusive for the Nintendo Switch 2. The VIP bot taken is Yharnam Tourist, who's a stand-in for Bloodborne's player character simply referred to as the Hunter, specifically using the design from the game's promotional material of a male character wearing the Hunter set, which consists of a black tricorn hat, grey duster coat, brown leather shoes, black gauntlets, and a bandana which covers the bottom half of their face, with the two weapons the Hunter uses in promo material, a saw cleaver and a Hunter blunderbuss, being an accessory called the Hunting Essentials. In the crash site, the bot will stand on a patch of grass swinging around the saw and will fire the blunderbuss upon being attacked. Moving on, we have the level Construction Derby, which features two VIP bots based on characters from the iconic rhythm game series PaRappa the Rapper, whose first entry released in 1996 for the original PlayStation, the game being published by Sony and was the second ever title made by studio Nana Onsha, which was founded by musician frontman of the Japanese pop band Size, Masuya Matsuura, with the title serving as a collaboration with Californian neo-surrealist artist Rodney Allen Greenblatt. The game follows the titular PaRappa as he attempts to win the favor of his crush Sunny Funny, doing so over the course of 6 stages where he performs alongside an instructor to learn karate, how to drive, sell stuff at a flea market, and bake a cake, before then battling against his former teachers to cut the line for the bathroom and finally perform on stage. The gameplay loop having the instructor dish out a line represented by button presses, which the player then has to copy afterwards, matching the original line's timing, with bonus points being awarded by improvising extra button presses that match up with the song's flow. PaRappa the Rapper would go on to sell over 1.6 million copies, garnered universal acclaim from critics, with the only major complaint being its short length, and is generally regarded as being the title that invented the modern rhythm game, providing the template that was later used for franchises such as Konami's Dance Dance Revolution, Sega's Samba de Amigo, Harmonix's Guitar Hero, and Ubisoft's Just Dance, with the title's success later leading to a guitar-oriented spin-off game with 1999's Jamalami, as well as a proper sequel which released in 2001 for the PlayStation 2, and whilst there hasn't been a new entry since PaRappa 2, the only other releases being ports of the previous entries, both the series and PaRappa himself are still regarded as icons of both PlayStation and the rhythm game genre. Unsurprisingly, the first bot pull from this series is one based on PaRappa, called Lovestruck Lyricist, in reference to the first game's plot and his affection for Sunny. He also comes with an accessory called Rap Amplifier, it being a microphone and turntable which the bot will dance next to, with attacking him causing the bot to do a backflip before posing and uttering PaRappa's motivational catchphrase, which he says before each level, "I gotta believe." The other bot, named Shredding Sheep, is based on Lammy, the main protagonist of the spin-off game Jamalami, who's a shy lamb that works as the lead and guitarist of a rock band called Milk Can, with the game following her journey to reach a concert she's supposed to be performing at in time, all the while getting thrown into over-the-top scenarios like putting out a fire and helping fly a plane, which she gets through despite being a nervous wreck by pretending she's playing a guitar, with Lammy and her band also appearing a few times throughout PaRappa the Rapper 2. The bot has the accessory Sunny 6-string, which is based on Lammy's guitar, which it will play in front of 2 small speakers in the crash site, with attacking the bot causing it to panic before shredding to calm back down. To talk about the actual level progression of Astro Bot one more time, after beating a world's boss, you then get one final level which pays direct homage to a specific PlayStation franchise, with all the bots you save within the level being themed to the series being referenced, along with the gameplay shifting slightly to more accurately recreate the feeling of the original series. In the case of the gorilla Nebula, after beating Mighty Chewy, who for anyone unfamiliar was also the first boss of Astro Bot Rescue Mission, you'll be able to go to the level Apes on the Loose, which is based on the Ape Escape series, a line of collectathon platformers made by PlayStation's Japan studio, the first entry releasing in 1999 for the original PlayStation. It's seeing you travel to various points in time to capture monkeys given heightened intelligence thanks to special helmets they were given before they disrupt the course of history, with the title also being one of the first that was specifically designed to be played with the DualShock controller, the upgraded version of the original PS1 controller, which added 2 control sticks and vibration feedback, which has since served as the basis for every PlayStation controller moving forward. The control scheme also having you utilize all of the face buttons to equip and use various tools and weapons to capture the monkeys. Ape Escape would end up becoming one of the most popular franchises to come from Japan Studio, the original game managing to sell at least 1.4 million copies, leading to 2 sequels on the PS2, a PSP remake of the original game, and multiple spin-offs and party games, with currently the last entry in the series being an on-rail shooter which came out in 2010 for the PS3 and was designed to be played with the PlayStation Move controllers, with the Apes also having crossover appearances in titles like Everybody's Golf 4, Ratchet and Clank Up Your Arsenal, and Metal Gear Solid 3. The first bot you encounter, and the one Astro Bot takes the power of, is Monkey Stalker, who's based on the main protagonist of the first entry, Spike, who gets tasked to capture the monkeys by the professor who built both the time station and the intelligence helmets, with Spike starting off with both a stun club to briefly paralyze the monkeys and a time net to capture them, the latter of which is the item he gives to Astro. Within the crash site, the bot can be given a bowl of cookies to munch through, in reference to cookies being your health in Ape Escape, Spike being able to take 5 hits before he dies. Now, to match the gameplay loop of Ape Escape, most of the VIP bots you encounter in this level are all modeled after Peepo monkeys, these being the titular apes you have to capture throughout the series, the monkeys typically having different behavior kinks which the player needs to learn in order to figure out the most efficient ways of capturing them, with the light on the top of their helmet being blue if they're in a calm state, yellow if they're being alerted, and red if they're actively trying to run away from you. To go through the various apes and their crash site accessories, there's Nervous Ape who lies on the ground looking over and watering a banana in a plant pot, Goofy Ape who chases after a banana tied to a stick attached to its helmet, Natural Ape who lies down on a deck chair with sunglasses, Self-Aware Ape who sits on a rock thinking deeply about the banana in its hand, a band consisting of the Shy Ape on vocals, Cheeky Ape on guitar, and Crazy Ape on drums, Skywalking Ape who does his best Solid Snake impression by hiding under a box, with him holding a banana like a gun if it's knocked off of him, and Aerial Ape who seemingly has taken Spike's time net. The final bot you find also doubles as the level's end boss, with Albino Antagonist being based on the main villain of the series, Spectre, an albino monkey who performed a juggling act at the monkey park before accidentally getting his hands on a peak point helmet which greatly boosted his intelligence, leading him to attempt to take over the world by freeing the rest of the apes, giving each of them similar helmets and spreading them across time, along with brainwashing Spike's friend Jake to work for him and improving his own helmet to give him access to psychic powers. The boss features the accessory Mastermind's Throne, which is the floating chair Spectre is frequently seen sitting on, with attacking it causing them to panic and fall out. To end things off, we'll quickly roll through the challenge levels, these being smaller scale levels in which the reward for beating them is an additional VIP bot. First up, we have Rolling Star Solar, which takes its bot from Doko demo Issyo, a series made by developer Backside, with the majority of the games only releasing in Japan, the first entry being a virtual pet game that released in 1999 for the original PlayStation, which sees you interact and take care of creatures called Pakepi, with most of the interactions for the game being done with an accessory called the Pocket Station, which served as a memory card which could also display images and play games on an LCD screen, in a very similar matter to the Dreamcast VMUs. And whilst a lot of games included content for the add-on, it never saw release outside Japan. Despite this though, the game reportedly still managed to sell over 1 million units, leading to multiple sequels and spin-offs, the most recent Tournament being a Match 3 mobile game that launched in 2019, but was shut down in 2021. The series being incredibly popular in Japan, despite not making much of a splash internationally until the PS3 era. The bot from this stage is Aspirational Cat, which is based on one of the main Pokepi and mascot of the series, Toro Inoue, a white cat that dreams to be a human who is pure and childish in nature, only wanting to learn about the world. You also might recognize him even if you're not familiar with the series, as on top of various crossover appearances in games like PlayStation All-Stars and Street Fighter Cross Tekken, Toro would prove to be so popular that he's widely considered to be the unofficial mascot of PlayStation in Japan. The bot also gets an accessory, which is a green carry bag, and by attacking him you can reveal what's inside, that being a sushi board, a checkered cup, and a pocket station. Next up is Crumble Rumble 1, with the bot you save here, named Home Run Hero, being a generic baseball player who's meant to represent MLB The Show, a series of annual baseball simulation games made by PlayStation's San Diego studio, which has been going since 2006, with it also kind of being a spiritual sequel to the MLB games made by 989 Sports, formerly Sony Interactive Studios America, which released from 1996 to 2005, with the show both being the only MLB sim game for consoles since 2014, as well as being one of the first PlayStation-owned franchises to go multi-platform, with MLB themselves, specifically MLB Advanced Media, publishing Xbox ports of the games beginning in 2021, with the following year also seeing it come to Nintendo Switch. The series consistently doing well, managing to sell around a couple million copies every year. After getting its accessory, named Batter's Boundary, the bot will stand around on a grass circle, practicing its swing, and by attacking it, the circle will flip over to reveal a home plate, with the bot then scoring a home run. And for our last all of this video, we have Retro Rampage 1, whose bot is pulled from Street Fighter, Capcom's legendary fighting game series, whose second entry effectively defined the template for the modern fighting game. Don't think too many people will be annoyed with me if I skip over general descriptors of what Street Fighter is, as it's so ubiquitous within general pop culture that it realistically does not need an introduction, provided you have at least some passing familiarity with the concept of fighting games. Instead, the question on your mind is more likely to be what exactly the series' relationship with PlayStation is, outside of the fact that it is indeed a platform you can play the games on. Well, in addition to the fact that Sony helped to at least partially fund Street Fighter V in exchange for it being a console exclusive on PS4, given the series' lack of releases on Nintendo platforms after the Super Nintendo, along with Xbox failing to make an impact and PC only fairly recently managing to catch on in the region, I don't think it's an unfair assessment to say that PlayStation has been the main platform for the series within Capcom's home market of Japan. Plus, given the fact Astro Bot doubled as a celebration of 30 years of PlayStation, including multi-platform series like Street Fighter, which definitely found its way into a lot of PlayStation fans' libraries over the years, makes sense, at least to me anyway. As for the bot in question, we have Disciplined Warrior, which is based on the series' original main protagonist and most iconic character, Ryu, the design specifically being based on his look in Street Fighter Alpha, which was the first entry to release on the PS1. Ignoring the game based on the live-action Street Fighter movie. Within the whole world, he mirrors Ryu's idol animations, having a fighting stance with him occasionally stopping to tighten his gloves and headband, with attacking him prompting the bot to fight back by launching his most iconic move at you, the Hadouken. And with that, we've completed the Gorilla Nebula. Hopefully if you enjoyed this, you'll join me next time as we move on to the second world, the Tentacle System. Feel free to leave any kind of feedback, whether it be positive or negative, and regardless of how you felt, thanks for watching.